This video is sponsored by NordVPN. After more than 3 years in power, Giorgia Meloni leads one of the most stable governments Italy has seen in decades. But honestly, this might all change after today. Because in this high-stakes referendum held last Sunday and Monday, Italians were asked a very technical question. Should the country change parts of its post-war constitution to reform how the justice system works? And Meloni lost, with 46% voting in favor and 54% against at the time of recording. And this is so significant, as it really weakens Meloni's position ahead of the 2027 Italian election. And it also damages her image as Europe's most successful right-wing leader. At the same time, it strengthens the opposition, who managed for once to rally around one shared concern and message. But before we look at all of these consequences for both Italy and Europe, what was the referendum actually about? And see the timestamps below if you want to jump straight to the analysis. At the heart of this referendum was one big idea. Meloni's government wanted to redraw the relationship between judges and prosecutors. Because in Italy today, judges and prosecutors both belong to the same branch of the state, the magistracy. They enter through the same highly competitive public exam, they are trained inside the same system, and they can even switch between working as a judge and working as a prosecutor. And that brings us to the first part of the proposal, the separation of careers of judges and prosecutors and the institutions that govern them. Under the suggested reform, future judges and prosecutors would no longer enter one common track. They would have to choose from the very start. One career for judges and another for prosecutors. And once that choice is made, there would be no moving back and forth between the two. The reform would also have changed how these professions are governed. Right now, both judges and prosecutors are overseen by the same constitutional body, the High Council of the Judiciary, or in short, CSM. The reform breaks that body into two. Instead of one CSM, there would have been two separate governing councils, one for the judges and of course another for the prosecutors. The logic is that if judges and prosecutors are going to have separate careers, then they should also have separate institutions. The second major change would have been the creation of a new high disciplinary court. Today, disciplinary cases involving judges and prosecutors are handled within the High Council of the Judiciary itself. The reform would have transferred this responsibility to a newly created separate institution, the High Disciplinary Court. And the third major change concerned how members of these governing bodies are selected. Today, the members of the High Council of the Judiciary are elected by judges and prosecutors themselves, while a smaller share is appointed by the parliament. Under the new rules, members of the two councils would be chosen randomly from pools of qualified judges, prosecutors, lawyers, and legal scholars. 2/3 would come from within the legal professions, while the remaining third would come from a list of candidates approved by the parliament. And similar rules would have also applied to the new High Disciplinary Court. The idea behind this change was to reduce the influence of internal factions and informal power networks that have long shaped judicial appointments in Italy. So, those were the proposed changes. And Meloni argued that they would modernize Italy's justice system, make the courts more impartial, and ultimately strengthen public trust in the rule of law. Critics, however, strongly disagreed. They warned that the reform could weaken judicial independence and reduce the autonomy of Italy's courts. But, to be very honest with you, this referendum was not really about the technical details of Italy's judicial system. It increasingly became a vote of confidence in Meloni and her government. And it was not good. The final result was 54% against versus 46% in favor. And as you can see from this graphic, there is a very clear political divide. Supporters of right-wing parties largely backed the reform, while voters from left-wing leaning parties overwhelmingly opposed it. And with a 59% turnout, which is so high for such a dry topic, this is not good for Meloni at all. So, what does this actually mean? Will she resign? Not quite, because she's already ruled that out, but it does weaken her in 3 key areas. First, the defeat significantly weakens Meloni inside her very own coalition, because it punctures the image she's carefully built since 2022. The image of a leader who simply does not lose. For the past 3 years, Meloni has dominated the coalition. Her junior partners had very little choice but to basically follow her lead. And now, they have leverage again. Matteo Salvini and his party Lega have spent years in Meloni's shadow. But Salvini is now also under pressure to show results and reassert the Lega's identity. And a weakened Meloni gives him an opportunity to push harder on traditional Lega priorities, such as regional autonomy or tougher positions on justice and migration. At the same time, we have Forza Italia, that may try to position itself as the more moderate and responsible force inside the coalition, distancing itself from reforms that appear too controversial or politically risky. But that does not mean the government will collapse, far from it. But as Italy moves closer to the 2027 election, Meloni may find it harder to keep her coalition united. And this brings us to the second reason why this result matters. Because the referendum defeat could significantly slow down Meloni's broader reform agenda, especially electoral reform. Because Meloni wants to push ahead with what she herself has called the mother of all reforms, the so-called, and I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce it, the premierato, a proposal to make the prime minister directly elected by the citizens. And with this defeat in her pocket, Meloni has less political capital to persuade the necessary lawmakers and to leverage her coalition partners, and of course less confidence that voters would approve another constitutional change. And finally, the third reason is that this result will likely re-energize Italy's fragmented center-left, because for the past years, the opposition has struggled so hard to present a united alternative to Meloni. But this referendum defeat shows that Meloni can be beaten, and the two largest opposition forces, the Democratic Party and the Five Star Movement, now suddenly have a shared incentive to cooperate more closely. And that kind of seems to be happening, or at least going in that direction, as Giuseppe Conte called for primary elections and explicitly pushed for a pro-European and progressive coalition. And yeah, if this came to fruition, a united left would likely be harder for Meloni and her brothers of Italy to beat. This is what I think. First, to the referendum itself, because having looked into the issue, Italy probably does need judicial reform, but for very, very different reasons than those proposed in this vote. Italy's courts are notoriously slow, and the legal costs are ridiculously high, because according to the European Commission, it takes an average of 511 days to obtain a first instance ruling in 2023. That is the third longest wait in the EU, with only Greece and Hungary performing worse. And that combination can deter foreign investment and ultimately weaken something I care a lot about, which is European competitiveness. So it would have been better to have a referendum on improving in this area. Second, let's have a look at Meloni's political position. Because in my opinion, from a European perspective, she has so far been so much less disruptive than I initially expected. Because on EU files and EU policy, Italy has remained very pragmatic. But losing this referendum, combined with her close relationship with Trump, is creating more pressure at home. And that could make her somewhat more risk-taking and unpredictable until the next Italian elections next year. So her newfound friendship with Friedrich Merz in Germany, or her pragmatism towards certain EU legislation, might get a lot less in the coming months if she wants to make a point at home. But time will tell, and I of course hope that she remains the pragmatic leader on a European level that she is today. As for her policies at home, in Italy, I honestly know very little about. So let me know in the comments, all of you Italians out there, of what you think about Meloni and her policies within Italy. And right now, with these results in Italy, and with everything else happening in the world, everything feels increasingly unstable. Wars, cyber attacks, data leaks, and governments blocking access to information are becoming more and more common. And when things get tense globally, protecting your digital privacy becomes more important than ever. That's why today's sponsor, NordVPN, link in the description and on the screen, is so incredible. I've been using NordVPN for ages because it encrypts my connection wherever I am. whether I'm editing scripts on trains, answering emails from cafes, or using hotel Wi-Fi. I just turn it on and don't even think about it. And when I'm traveling, I can still access my paid services from back home, so everything works the way I'm used to. But NordVPN actually does so much more than just the travel side of things. For example, your password is your first line of defense online, and most people reuse the same one everywhere. All it takes is one random site with bad security, and attackers can suddenly try that password on all of your other accounts. NordVPN's Dark Web Monitor alerts you if your details show up on hacker sites, and the free NordPass Password Manager helps you generate and autofill strong, unique passwords. You can get an exclusive NordVPN deal by heading to nordvpn.com/EUMadeSimple or using my code EUMadeSimple, which gets you a huge discount on a 2-year plan, plus 4 months extra for free, all backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. That is a great deal, so go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all of our presidents shown on the screen. See you in the next video.